Hello Dream Theater fans, and welcome to episode number 10 of the Let's Learn Falling into Infinity Guitar and Analysis series. Today, we'll be focusing on a track titled Anna Lee. Now, James Labrie, the singer of Dream Theater, said he wrote this song after reading about a sexual abuse case involving a girl named Natalie, hence the name Anna Lee. The lyrics appear to be a more broad approach to the topic of human sex trafficking, something that in my lifetime has been covered under the cloak of darkness by, let's say, high-level politicians, corporate leaders, hedge fund managers, and a certain billionaire lingerie salesman that will not be named because I'm not getting this YouTube video demonetized, okay people? We're not going to go that route. But our hero, James Labrie, has something else up his sleeve, and he wishes to expose this criminal network through his lyricism. But there is something curious to be observed about the song title. Now take the song title, Anna Lee, and let's perceive it from a different angle here. Let's pronounce it slightly differently, alright? In the context of the bunghole. That's right, the rear end, if you know what I'm talking about. The dark annals of history, this historical topic that we're talking about. Anna Lee. Just say it slightly differently than that, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Just put your mind in the gutter, alright? That's all I'm asking of you. Now, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not. After all, I did just read this on some random forum. These are just some random theories and, a running gag within the comments section of various posts about the song. But, doesn't really matter to me. If it was intentional, if it wasn't intentional, I don't really care. Because we have some different plans for this video. And unlike James Labrie, who is acting like a hero in a way that he knows how to do it, we are going to be heroic in a different sense. And that is through every single note, every single time change, every single chord progression in a full, detailed musical analysis of Anna Lee by Dream Theater. Anna Lee is not your typical Dream Theater song. While most of their music is focused on technical prowess and highly advanced musical wizardry, this song stands out as truly breaking that mold. A tender ballad. One with zero focus on speed and all attention focused on beautiful, melodic, and slow musical phrasing. The real standout here is keyboardist Derek Sherinian, who does his best Elton John impression throughout the duration of the track, which, by the way, is performed on a real acoustic piano. Somewhat of a kryptonite to their current keyboard player. Now, this video is not meant to be a comparison of all the Dream Theater keyboard players, but this particular track does highlight Derek Sherinian's affinity toward analog instruments, which, by the way, sound very, very, very good. I don't know if you could tell that I'm a big fan of analog stuff, and I think it has a superior tone to a lot of its digital imitators, if I must say. But another thing to point out is that there is an apparent lack of this sort of thing on releases prior to Falling into Infinity and after Falling into Infinity, especially after. We can forgive the guy before. Now, without wasting any more of your time, let's get into this very beautifully played Derek Sherinian intro that occurs at the beginning of the song. Let's have a listen. This introduction focuses on melodic lines which surround two distinct chords. An A major, which is the 1 chord, and D minor with an A in the bass, which is the minor 4 chord in second inversion. This pedal tone A creates a very tense environment for the two chords A and D minor. You have the bright sound of the A major, and then you have the very dark sound of the D minor. So this is a great synthesis between the two, and a vital connecting piece that remains throughout the song. This then takes us into the first verse, which expands this idea a little bit farther. Let's listen through one full time. We start with the same tonality moving between A and D minor. Upon returning to A, we have this descending bass line that hits a G underneath the A, which we can call an A7 over G, which is a third inversion 7th chord. Pretty cool sound. This then moves to the bass note F, while the chord once again switches to D minor. This creates a first inversion D minor chord. This is a very clever way of using the same two chords over and over again without it being boring. After that, we hit a G bass, which represents a flat 7 chord function coming back to A. So all in all, we have the 1 chord A major going to that D minor in 2nd inversion. Listen to that pedal tone. Back to A, then with the G, that's a 1, 6, 4, 2. All right, that 3rd inversion 7th chord, which then goes to here. That's a D minor in 1st inversion now, or a 4-6 chord. And then the final chord is this. It's basically a G with a D minor on the top. All right? Now that's essentially like a G7 with a sus2, but it's a flat 7th chord function, which is used to go back to A the first time, but the second time around, it goes into a C sharp. So we basically have a G chord function that goes from this G to a C sharp. That's a tritone away. Now ordinarily that's an incredibly rocky transition, but because we have a D minor on the top of the chord that's basically sustained for that whole time, we can just take that as moving from D minor down to C sharp minor down a half step. Alright, so if we take that at its value, boom, we have a much less rocky transition that offsets the craziness and the roughness, frankly, of the tritone. C sharp minor is also the 3 chord of A major, which has been our key this entire time. We can also see it as a reharmonization of the 1 chord. For example, if we stack a C sharp minor triad, C sharp E, G, on top of an A triad, A, C sharp, E, we get an A major 7th chord, which occurs naturally in that scale. The 2 levels of consistency, having the D minor over G move a half step down, and having a C sharp minor as an extension of A, both brilliantly get us into this pre-chorus using the interval of a tritone. And this first pre-chorus is also where the first guitar, an acoustic guitar, enters the song. The arrangement is still very bare, so be sure to strum very lightly to match Derek Sherinian's tenderness on the ebony and ivory. And here are the chords. We start with that C sharp minor to A, E over G sharp, F sharp minor, D, A over C sharp, B minor over A, E over G sharp to E. Alright, now the next section, when it hits the G chord, that's the chorus, so we're not going to get there yet. Alright, now this all follows a very simple strumming pattern. It's basically just a boom, chicka boom, chicka boom, chicka boom, or a 1, and a 2, and a 3, and a 4. And we're going to see a whole hell of a lot of that throughout this entire song, alright? So, now let's go through the chord functions, okay? We have a lot of inversions here, but all of them are within the key of A major properly, which honestly is unheard of for a Dream Theater song as well. I guess Derek Sherinian is bringing a proper A major song, or a proper major key into the band's fold. Sometimes these guys have to relearn the basics, and this is perfect, because they have a song that one of the guys wrote in the band that gives us a perfect opportunity to play A major here, alright? So, every single one of these chords falls very neatly within that. Now I'd like to note that every single harmonic function is hit, except for the 7 leading tones. So there's no diminished chords in here to give us all 7 harmonic functions. But we have an A, we got a C sharp minor, we got an E over G sharp, we got a regular E, we got an F sharp minor, we got a D, we got a C sharp with an A on the bottom. which is crazy. It's not actually a C sharp with an A on the bottom, it's actually a C sharp in the bass on the bottom of an A, alright? So that's the exact opposite of what I just said. We have a B minor, we got a B minor over an A. We have so many chords here. Let's keep it going with a big old key change right in the middle of all that. Same old story with that strumming, but now we're just in a different key. We're now in the key of G with the ebony and ivory. Here we go. We have a G chord with this voicing to a D chord with this voicing, okay? We're basically not using the pointer, muting the A string on that. Now, this chord goes from having an A on the bottom to having just a regular D on the bottom, alright? A pure D major chord. But the keyboard is actually hitting an F sharp in the bass, so this allows for the guitar to breathe a little bit more so that only one instrument takes on that role of inverting the chord. Alright, let's finish off this chorus here. We basically, after coming through G, I'll just play the whole thing up until that point, right? To D, that goes through twice. Chicka boom, chicka boom, chicka boom. Alright, now we have the D over F sharp, but we just play a regular D chord. Then to a G again. Now watch. That's where we switch chords, and I'll keep going from there. Some more colorful chords there, alright? We kind of deviate from the regular harmonic functions of G major. Essentially what we have here, when we get to that other G chord toward the end, 2 and a 3 and a 4 rienda. That's basically a D chord coming in on the syncopation of that final beat, which leads, alright, into an E minor chord like this. All the way up at the 7th fret, okay, for those 2 beats. And then we play basically that same chord over a D, but a very curious voicing here because we're using basically a G major on top of a D, which, by the way, is the same as E minor 7th, alright? If you have the notes E, G, B, D, well guess what? The notes G, B, D is a G major chord. Just put it on top of an E, you have yourself an E minor 7th, alright? But in this case, we have the D as an open D, and this, ironically enough, D chord shape up at the 7th fret, which is really a G, on top of the D. Then we go to this nice resolution where that 7th fret comes up a half step to a C major bar chord, and then we just hold out a C minor as the piano and bass, actually no, just the piano and vocal take over for the ending. The only thing to add here is that since the pre-chorus and up until this point, James LaBrie's vocal has been doubled. And that added degree of thickness comes straight from his Canadian bulge. Listen to the vocal just prior to the pre-chorus. Will they feel your pain? There is only one James LaBrie here. Fast forward to the next line and boom. Trying to believe. 2 James LaBries. This is a very common recording technique that has been used all the way back since the days of John Lennon in the 1960s. The end of that chorus sees a drop-off of the acoustic guitar and a drop-off of James LaBrie's second vocal to add a little bit more tenderness and vulnerability to those 2 sections. Take a listen. Here, we start with 3 chords that move down chromatically. G over B, which is the 1 chord in first inversion, a G diminished over B flat, which is technically a subtonic diminished chord to the A minor, which by the way is still the 2 chord going right to the D major, which is 5. Let me give you a quick rundown on how this descending progression kind of works. Alright, we basically have the G over B, the B diminished like this, all with a common tone G in a middle octave and a high octave. So you have two G's that remain constant the entire time. Listen, ready? That octave G remains the entire time. And even on the D chord at the end, it's a sus4, which is a G. Alright, so keeping that G melodically and harmonically the most important note is crucial to this whole thing. Now, the second reason why it works is because, very simply, we have close chromatic bass notes. Alright? These notes don't move very far. Makes it very easy to manipulate everything on top without doing all too much. Now, the third reason is because this is a blues trope, alright? This is a very common blues idea. Alright, you hear that? Those are all the same motions going on, alright? All the same functions just played as a lick, and I know you've heard that before. Alright, very, very common idea. The fourth reason is that this is Plush by Stone Temple Pilots. Alright, except it doesn't go to G at the very end, it goes to a D. But you get the point here. Alright, Derek Sherinian clearly was influenced by tons of guitar bands from the late 80s, the early 90s, and yeah. Anybody who's been on this channel for this series understands that I believe that Derek Sherinian is a guitar player trapped in a keyboardist's body. And I will stand by that. Okay, now let's move on to the second half of this very tender section. This is going to be the transitional riff between this part, the end of the chorus, and the beginning of verse 2. The second half to this chorus ending has some unique chords and other elements that help get us smoothly into the second verse. Let's listen to the chords first. We have a G as the one chord, to a minor 4, C minor, with the G in the bass. This mimics the chord movement from the first verse. Here, check it out. Here's verse 1. This is the A to a D minor with an A in the bass. Fast forward, this is the end of this chorus part. G is the 1 to the C minor with the G in the bass. It's the same thing, but a whole step down from where we started. After the C minor, we return to the G as the 1 chord once again, which then moves to the regular 5 chord D major. This is then used to pivot back into A major. So technically the D chord is now a 4 chord, which leaves the G major as a flat 7 just as it was in the verse. This is called a Mixolydian progression because it utilizes the flat 7th chord. Listen, ready? We got G, D, A. Alright, classic rock and roll sound. How many AC/DC songs you heard with that progression? I'd gather a lot. Now let's go through that. I'm going to say and play them one more time. We got G as the 1 chord, to the C minor as the inverted 4, back to the 1, the D, which is basically the 4 chord, resolving to our new 1 for verse 2, which is A major. Aside from the piano, there are a few things that come in at the end of this section. On the final 4 chords, we have this synthesizer that enters. It almost sounds like a horn part. Now that's one horny synthesizer. We also have the introduction of this drum fill and guitar lead duo that brings us into the second verse. Let's hear the drums first. Now the guitar. Just some tasty licks and fills to give us a more melodic instrumentation. Let's just grab that guitar lick for a quick second. It's all about the articulation here. We actually start with a slide coming in from above the note. So check this out, ready? Now pay attention to all those different slides that I did. So we slide in from above. I'd say slide in from the 10th to the 8th fret like this. And then slide back up, immediately back, but don't slide necessarily as an effect into the 7th fret. You want to do it like this. You want to stop the note before going into it. So technically your finger is sliding, but you're not sliding the note itself. And then you're going to do a full step bend at the 5th fret, or a pre-bend, and then to the 3rd fret, which then slides up to the 5th for the resolution of the final lick. Now, all of these notes, okay, go right along with the chord. Alright, so essentially, we have the very first one on top of the G, going to an A, anticipating the D, which is basically the 3rd of that chord, and then comes in like this. That's Mi, Re, Do, Mary Had a Little Lamb. Alright? Which then resolves very nicely into the 5th of the A. Alright, so perfect melodic composition. Now with that lick out of the way, we can finally get into verse 2, which has a couple of guitar layers to go through, and also one added guitar layer that's not actually a guitar at all. The acoustic guitar is now involved within the verse voicing, so let's see how John Petrucci handles this acoustic guitar. It starts on an open A chord with the same strumming pattern, just with some different voicing spread throughout. Check it out, ready? We got that A, open A, same boom chicka boom. Look at that, D minor, slightly different. I'll talk about that in a bit. So let's go over that first half. Start off with a standard open A 5-string chord, which then goes very nicely into this D minor. It's basically the same D minor over the A, but it's hitting the open E string as well. So that's a D minor with an added 9th, all right, over A, which creates that very, very tense but very beautiful sound, which then goes back to A, the 1 chord. The A over G is just handled like that. Just put the middle finger down here and the pointer finger right there with the bar. Flip the bird to the flat 7th. And then here is a D minor over an F. Now I like to use my thumb here, and he is actually playing all of these notes. Alright, you can hear the full D minor up top and the F on the bottom. So I suspect the thumb was used here. And that's the voicing. Alright, it's the same chord. But then when we hit the G, he actually hits a bar chord on there. Alright, so this is why I said this is definitely a flat 7th harmonic function, because it's obviously a G chord. John Petrucci's playing a G chord. Why wouldn't it be a G chord? Alright? It could be a G, 7 sus 2. Alright? But that's in the piano part. John Petrucci's playing it, so we must abide by those rules. Let's get the second half, or the second ending of this. So we basically do all the same stuff with that nice D minor add 9, right? Coming back into the descending bass. Now here, we hit a regular D minor, and the second half of the measure, we hit a D minor over F, but like this, with the 3rd fret of the D string, all right? So it goes open. So you're gonna wanna play the D minor with the middle, pinky, and pointer instead. And then this one, just add the ring finger in there to get that. It's a second inversion D minor chord. Now before moving on to the next guitar layer, we do have to talk about that second ending of the second verse. I'll play the ending of the first verse first. Remember how the bass note G was played moving to the C sharp minor? Well, take a look at the ending of the second verse. Notice anything? Yep, it doesn't move to G at all. Instead, it hangs on the F. An extremely subtle difference that was clearly intentional, but I'm not entirely sure why though. Anyway, with all that nonsense out of the way, let's get into the next guitar layer. Now, did you notice something a little peculiar about the sound of that guitar? That's right. John Petrucci is actually using a Leslie speaker to create that rotary sound. It's actually a speaker that rotates constantly. It's commonly used amongst organ players mostly, but John Petrucci decided to take a stab on it on this song. Now, I don't have this effect readily available at the moment, so you're just going to have to deal with it dry, but that's okay. It's easier to hear the notes that way anyway. So essentially we're just using arpeggios to kind of color in the chords being played underneath on the acoustic guitar. Starting with the A major. Listen to this. Very nice. Little steps. Little steps. And the same thing repeats exactly 2 times in a row. Okay, so this first one is an A chord. Alright? It's an A major. Big time. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Not that one. Yeah, we're looking for that one. That's what we're looking for. Alright, so that's an A major in second inversion, but it's just outlining that A major chord with the second scale degree coming down to the root just like that. And then we have a D minor, very close neighbor, but then using these 2 notes. That is a C sharp and a B. Okay, now a C sharp is a major 7th to the D, so that means we have a D minor with a major 7th. A very tense sound. And we also have a major 6th, alright? So this major 7th and major 6th outlines what's called a melodic minor idea. So this is basically D melodic minor, okay? Very, very, very cool sound. Excellent for this particular part, and really does its job. It has a very unique feel to it. Alright, especially when you have that minor 4 and you keep all of the notes of A major intact. Right, you get that on top of both chords, which is really, really cool. Coming into the later parts, you hit that same A, but then we're now going to an A 7th, or this looks like a kind of a diminished chord here, right? Alright, you basically have a G diminished right there. But when you play that, you have that A7 being performed. Alright, so pretty cool. Wait a minute. That's a C sharp diminished. I am terribly sorry. A C sharp diminished on top of an A creates an A7, which is exactly what the doctor ordered here. And then here we just finish it off with that order, which then goes half step down to the A once again. All right, a lot of half step resolutions in Dream Theater's music. With all that in mind, let's see how the acoustic guitar and rotary guitar blend together for this verse. One thing that separates Derek Sherinian from other keyboard players is his ability to play like a guitar player, or in this case, mimic a guitar player just like a chameleon. Take a listen to this. Yeah, I thought that was an actual guitar when I first heard it too. I was completely fooled, but the more I listened, the more something felt amiss. I tried and tried to get a tone close to this, and then it hit me. It's a frickin' keyboard. The second pre-chorus section has all of the same acoustic guitar chords that we heard in the first one, but with the addition of this distorted guitar part playing licks on top of the progression. Let's take a listen to that. All of these notes go along with the chord progression absolutely perfectly. And basically you have to start with the volume pedal all the way down, or mostly down, and basically play it very quietly, like this. And then once you get to the A major chord, or the A triad, that's when you start to put the gas on that volume pedal, alright? So it starts off quiet, then it gets louder. So a true crescendo. Then this little melodic line, and then here. Now this is a very interesting and curious part, because you actually have to use these two fingers, the middle and the ring on the 7th fret, and then pull off into that one, and then basically let go of the E string after. Which is a kind of a weird thing to play, especially since you have to wear a frickin' slide the whole time, because guess what? We're going to be going into a slide guitar part right after. But let's just take a listen to some of these things. So this is basically well, not a listen, let's do a full-blown analysis here. The C sharp minor triad right here, watch. Basically a second inversion triad being colored over the top. And then this represents the A chord, and that represents the E chord, alright, which then goes F sharp minor. That's the flat third, a very nice sound. And then for the D, that's the third, that's an F sharp, alright, then kind of like a little 7 to 1 on the A, and then that's the flat third and the 9th of the B minor chord, alright? And then here, that's a nice resolution to the E chord, which basically resolves once again to the note E. Now let's get all of that as a chord melody going along with that. So check this out, we have that C sharp minor. F sharp. Those notes go along with the chord progression absolutely perfectly. This pre-chorus also sees the addition of some vocal harmonies. We start out with some very nice oohs. Then on the second line we get a proper harmony up top.
The scars unseen.
This outlines the 3rd of the D major chord, the 5th of the A, and the flat 3rd of the B minor. All just moving downward throughout the scale. This then goes through more thirds through the B minor, and then this nice riffy idea on the E chord, which, by the way, is a 6/9 chord.
The tears wash clean.
Ah yes, the Dream Theater boys could not help but put a 69 in this song as well. If you've been watching this channel, you understand that 69 and Dream Theater, or DT, 6/9, DT, 69, Dream Theater, are basically synonymous with each other at this point. And yeah, Anna Lee, more like Anna Lee 69, if you want to understand that. Unbelievable, people. Stop it. Now before getting into that slide guitar that kicks off the chorus, let's talk about the acoustic for a little bit. And it basically happens at the very end of the progression. Basically when we hit that final G chord before it goes to the E minor, it plays along with the band instead of doing that usual boom chicka boom that it was doing before. So instead of going like this, goes like this. That shows a fundamental awareness of the arrangement, John Petrucci. Very good studio work. Alright, now let's check out the lead guitar. I gotta put this back up on the stand up there, and then I'm gonna get this guitar right over here, and I'm gonna blow it over to the amp right over here. I'm gonna take it off standby, and boom, we got ourselves some noise, so let's make some noise. Now we got some classic slide licks being performed here. Little bit of flange, a little bit of phase, and a little bit of fuzz. But I'm going to play it dry for you, and I'm going to play it nice and slow as well, all the way through. So check this out. We're basically starting right here. We're going big old slide up until the 12th fret, and to the 7th. That represents D. Then this cool little thing. Hitting the F sharp as the inversion. Open G. Big dive. Then into the single notes. And then we nicely just get out of the way of that beautiful piano part. So essentially all these parts just outline the chords. That's a G major chord, which is the chord that happens underneath, which then slides down to a D major chord. Does it again. Now this lick, that's basically an Elton John inspired lick. More like Elton John Petrucci, am I right? But seriously, it does remind me of that. And then once we come down to the D again, we have this little arpeggio, watch. And then we do a big old slide using all 4 of those strings. So here's from the Elton John arpeggio. Not the Elton John arpeggio, the lick, watch. We hit the 2nd fret of the low E string by itself. That represents the first inversion D major chord that happens with the holding on. Holding on. Holding on. Alright, that G, we hold it out for a half note and then boom, big dive on the slide. And then right on that syncopated chord, we hit that D, right at the same time that it changes in the acoustic, alright? And it looks like that. There's the open D, open A, and the A on the G string. Alright, just a little bit of a power chord there, an inverted one. A very sticky and crunchy one. Check it out. Now this next part, we just go along with the roots for the most part. E minor over D, that's the bass line, or the flatted 7th, and the root of the C chord, and then the flatted 3rd of the C minor. Very, very, very clever, Elton John Petrucci. The keyboards and bass also add to this section with their own unique contributions. Let's check out the keys first. This is taking a page right out of Kevin Moore's book with the single note synth ideas. This just simply fills in some of the chord progression with a little extra sizzle. Now on to the bass. Here we have 2 quite fancy fills coming in from Mr. John Mayum. The first one is actually outlining the 9th of the D chord. A D add 9 or a D sus2, which has that sound to it. The second fill is even more busy. It also sticks out in the mix far more than usual. This is done intentionally, and I know that because this line happens later on in the song on the guitar as well. Let's hear it one more time. It's more than just a bass fill. It's a compositional idea. The next section, and also the loudest section, is the bridge, which really showcases James LaBrie's vocal prowess, and I believe might be the only reason that it exists. We have two proper guitar layers, we have a false guitar layer, you know what I'm saying, and we have two proper keyboard layers as well that make up this whole section. So let's take a listen to that first guitar layer that comes in here. Check it out. Let's get that from the beginning again, and then just kind of put a microscope over it, why don't we? Alright, so basically we're hitting an F with some octaves in there. Alright, so that's after the G build. Listen to the rhythm here as well, watch. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. On the and of beat 4, you're hitting that F. So this section starts on an upbeat. Very, very, very awkward if you ask me. But it works really well because these musicians are playing that anticipation very, very tightly. Alright, so we have the F on the upbeat. And then ba, boom, ba. Alright, so if you listen to the count, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2, 3, 4 and 2. Right? It's basically on the and of 4 and then right on beat 2 where it happens again. And you want to keep those octaves ringing out as well. Mind you, this also has that incredibly fuzzy tone on it, alright? Which really adds to a very muddy type of flavor. A lot more muddy than I'm used to hearing from John Petrucci. It's almost grungy sounding, alright, if you listen to it by itself. But yeah, that's basically what's happening. Now, on the next go around with these pedal tones, it's not really a pedal tone anymore. We're intentionally hitting the F octave with the open G string ringing out. That's right. Basically the same idea. It's the exact same thing, but with the open G string on top. Very, very, very strange. It's almost like an F sus2. But when we start hearing all the other layers and going through that, you're going to realize it's not just an F sus2 at all. Alright? Okay, after that part, we have to hit into this sort of lick. Well, it's not sort of a lick, it is a lick, and it's a riff as well. Very, very cool. Alright, listen to that again. Watch, you got the 3rd fret sliding really quick to the 5th. And then we just go right up, 5th fret again, to the 3rd, and then this time slide from 5 to 7 into there. That's just an F pentatonic, a major pentatonic, coming off the... Very, very cool sound. And I also have to mention that that lick is played along with the bass guitar as well. So all sorts of little licks in this song that just feel like solo fills or just like randomness, they're actually not random because multiple band members are playing them. Alright, so this is clearly a part of the composition that's meant to be here. Alright, so let's finish off this bridge part. Basically after that fill we have these tiny, tiny, tiny chords. They're oh so tiny. And we have basically the 5th fret of the D and the G string, which represents the C chord. And then we go here, that's the 3rd fret of both those same strings, alright? What is this, a Judas Priest song? Get the hell out of here, right? That represents a B flat. And then we basically hit this power chord, but separate. Go into another power chord, E flat to F, how creative. And then here, that's a D flat sus4, sus2, I'm sorry, D flat sus2, to an E sus2, just with a higher voicing outlined, to an F power chord, where we finally just kind of slide into oblivion out of that, alright? So, let me just play that second half for you again, watch this. Don't do that pick slide or I'll frickin' murder ya. Alright, now remember that fake guitar that I was telling you about? Let's take a look at that. This is yet another moment where I heard something curious in the guitar track for this song. Listen for yourself. Did you hear that little slide with the power chords in there? No? One more time. Yep, I'm absolutely convinced that that is Derek Sherinian's synthesizer that creeped itself onto the official guitar stem of the track. All it's doing is going between an E flat and F power chord, Judas Priest style. I'll still never get over the fact that we have fake guitar parts in a Dream Theater song. These songs are hard enough to get through. Why do you have to add this extra layer of tomfoolery for me? Let's get into the next actual guitar layer. Now you want to make sure you're keeping track of your beats here, alright? So like I mentioned just before, we're starting on an upbeat, but then coming down onto a downbeat for two basically measures in a row, okay? So it's up, down, down, then up, alright? Then it continues to syncopate, but you really just have to pay attention to where those eighth notes actually lie, okay? I'm going to go through that one more time just so you can see that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Up, down, down. Up, down, down. Up, up, down, up. Down, up, up. Alright, so a lot of syncopation going on. You can't lose track here. Now let's look at some of the Roman numerals and the chord progressions that are going on here. We basically start out with a pedal tone F for the first three chords, alright? Now this, that's an E flat on top of an F, alright? That is the flat seventh of our progression here. So another Mixolydian idea. Alright, it sounds like that when you play it on top of an F. A very suspended sound. Then we hit this voicing. Now this is a B flat. Alright, so that's a B flat over an F. That's not as strange. That's a second inversion B flat chord. So basically the 4 chord to R1, which is here. Which also hits the sus4, resolving to the 3rd. So once again we have a flat 7th chord, E flat, B flat, which is a 4, to the 1 chord with a nice sus4. That repeats twice. Okay, a Mixolydian chord progression. Okay, and then we hit this. Alright, that's a C minor chord. Alright, going to a B flat over a D. Alright, so how do we account for this C minor? Well, our key is F. Alright, so we have flat 7, 4, 1. We're going to a minor 4 chord. How cool is that? Right? And then we go to a, essentially, well, not a minor 4 chord, a minor 5 chord, I'm sorry. C minor is a minor 5 chord to a 4 chord in first inversion, which then goes to the flat 7th, to the 1, with a sus2. And then, at the very ending, we throw this curveball in there. Flat 6, flat 7th, 1 for a whole tone resolution up to the major 1 chord. Alright, so that's borrowed from the F minor scale, the flat 6, flat 7th, and the minor 1. But it's not minor 1, it's major 1. Alright, this is prog rock here, so we always have that whole tone progression resolving itself basically kind of like a Mario game at the end of the level. Let's hear those two bridge guitars together so we can gather the full context here. Alrighty, now it's time to finally get into the guitar solo, a very melodic one at that. First, we're going to focus on the chords that are going on in the background. I'll play both the acoustic strumming on the bottom and the solo on top with a focus on the acoustic strumming. We have a quite lengthy 16-bar guitar solo. Now, usually a 16-bar guitar solo is not that long, but because our tempo is so slow, it takes quite a while to get through all those changes, we'll say. Now, the changes are actually quite familiar for the most part, with some allusions to earlier sections, but it does deviate as it moves along, and we'll see that. It basically starts out with the verse progression, but down a whole step in the key of G instead. And in many instances here, we're not playing the inversions that are reflected in the bass or the keyboard part. So keep that in mind here. This is strictly what the guitar is playing, okay? So we have a G as the 1 chord, okay? To a C minor as the 2nd inversion 4 chord. Just like the verse, back to the 1, then actually we're supposed to do this, an open G to this, okay, that 1, 6, 4, 2 once again, into the C minor, then we hit an F7, going back to the G, which is the 1, that's the flat 7, okay, that C minor, 2nd inversion again, then this G, 1, 6, 4, 2, 7th chord and 3rd inversion, C. Now this time we stay on that C, and then we go to a G7 chord. That's a C sus4 to a C major. Then a G over B with that nice half-step bass resolution going into A minor, A minor over G, or this is actually an A minor over G, but it's like basically an A minor 9th, alright? But the bass is going down to a G, and so is the keyboard, alright? And then we hit a D over F sharp to a regular D, alright? Which is very, very nice. Then we hit the ending of the solo, it's just this basic bitch Oasis chords, watch. G with the 2 here, and then A7, that's a secondary dominant, which doesn't actually go to the dominant. Right to a C chord, C add 9, that's Wonderwall, people. That's the 4 chord, which then resolves to a G, which actually has the open B in there this time around, alright? So lots and lots of chords going on here, but some familiar junctures, okay? So we basically have that sort of descending minor line that we've seen before, alright? But then we just hit a unique ending at the very, well, the end, alright? So nothing really too crazy going on here. Alrighty, with all of that in mind, all those chord functions in mind, hopefully you memorize that whole chord progression because we're going to need it as we play this very beautifully played slide guitar solo from Mr. John Petrucci, the Italian stallion up on Mount Vesuvius. He was the only survivor at Pompeii. His beard is an ancient ruler of Rome. Alright, let's crack into that first section. I'll play it slow for you first. We slide from the 2nd to the 4th, just like this. Ready? Alright. Alright, so a nice melodic and slow-moving slide guitar solo. Interesting, alright? Up until this point, the slide guitar has only been something that John Petrucci has colored in or played in the background. This is the first time it's really on the forefront, alright? So that's very important to note. This is a historic moment for John Petrucci's slide guitar, alright? So we're going... Then 3, 4, 5, flat third of the C minor. Sliding out of it. You always want to make those dives to give it that sort of dolphin type of sound. Like we're communicating with Echo the Dolphin. Alright? Check it out. Continue it for that big slide up to the 12th fret there as well. We're basically going 3, 4, 5, and then flat 3, 2, 1 on the C minor. So pretty basic melodic lines here. 3, 4, 5 on the G, 3, 2, 1 on the C, and then going up to the G, which is basically the 5th of the C chord, but then coming down to the 5th of the G. Alright, and then sliding down, basically doing the same melodic move again. 4, 4, 5, or 3, 4, 5. No, 3, 3, 4, 5. And then this one, this is kind of a melodic minor move. Alright, just like we saw in the first verse with that rotary guitar, we're going flat 3. Alright, once you hit a C and that B natural, the B natural is the major 7th. Alright, so that's basically a C minor major 7th, which is a crazy sounding chord, and that it's basically all the notes of a G major scale being played on top of a C. Alright? And the resolution is finally a perfect 4th, but using the notes of a G power chord. Alright, so play that one more time. And of course sliding out of that nice and tastefully. And once again, all of John Petrucci's melody lines go perfectly with the chord progression. Here, check this out. Here's the first part of the solo there. With the chords. Absolutely beautiful. Here's the second half of that verse portion. We basically developed the idea into a higher octave this time. All the same notes though, essentially. Check it out. So all happening over the same chords essentially. You have the 4th, or I'm sorry, the 3rd going to the minor 3rd, alright, of the C minor, and then here this big hop up right here. That is the A going to a G. That's the 2 and the root of the G major, or in this case, the natural 6th of the C. Alright, so the C minor is a C minor 6, which is a very common move when utilizing a minor 4 chord in a major key. And then we come up here. Those are all the same notes that we saw, just up the octave, right? 3, 4, 5, and then here we're suspending on the 2 for that C minor. Just scaling down to G and then sliding out of it. Nothing crazy happening here. Now, just to prove that this is melodically perfect, I'm going to play another chord melody here. Check this out. Ready? Second half of that verse part. And then absolutely beautiful once again. The next section represents what essentially is the pre-chorus section, but only parts of it. It only hints at being the pre-chorus part. But But we also have to use the slide and then not use the slide. So I'm going to tell you exactly when that happens. You're going to see it happen yourself. So after we slide out of that 12th fret from the previous lick, right? So we have... we go right up to here, watch. That's where we have the bar come in, alright? So we have the slide for the first part. And then right on that resolution, we have the bar on a C chord right there, alright? So this is basically the flat 7th of the G, going up to the root and then back, and then we hit a C sus4. Pretty cool sound, right? And that's basically doing a hybrid technique. You're using the slide for some notes and then using your fingers for the others, right? Which right here we go full finger. I guess John Petrucci got tired of using the slide. I don't blame him. I don't particularly like playing slide, but I have to show you. I have to play it for you guys today, okay? I don't usually enjoy this, but today I'm forcing myself to enjoy it. Gosh darn it, you beautiful people. You are wonderful people, all right? I will play slide guitar for you any day of the week. I promise, to the end of time. Okay, anyway, let's get back into this. So essentially, we have this sort of bluesy A minor pentatonic lick, which happens right on top of the descending A minor progression there. All right, so. And then we have this one. All right, but we'll save that for later. So let's check this out. Ready? We have this sort of, watch. Boom. A minor pentatonic right on the A minor. We have basically a little double full bend, release, pull off, and then classic blues. And then right on the D7 or the D chord, we hit a step and a half, all right, with a little bit of a wiggle on the top. That's basically a C. That's the flat 7th of the D chord. And then we have to go all the way up here. All right, but I'm going to save that for the next section. Let's get a chord melody of that, why don't we? Check this out. We're basically on G7. C sus4. Another A minor, and then all D7 right on the end there. All right, so once again, perfectly and melodically in line with the harmonic progression. Now here's the final section. We basically go between using the slide and not once again. Starting with not. We're using our fingers here. Use your ring finger to bend this 20th fret way up. Whole step. And that 19th fret bend is a half step to a pull off and then this little melodic bit. We're just scaling down the G scale, which goes right on the G chord, by the way. Nothing crazy. And then we immediately got to bring our slide back like this. And we have this B string line. And then slide off of that. That's resolving into the A chord, the A major. All right, that's a sus4. Resolving to the 3rd and dipping out as fast as possible because that slide lick just robbed a grocery store. All right, they're running from the cops. And then we come back up, landing on the C, that's the root note of the next chord, which then has the Elton John ending, which basically made him cream his pants right at the gay guy rally, whatever the hell's going on. Listen, right there. That's how it ends. All right, people? Let's not take ourselves too seriously here. Please. Forget all that I just said. Check this out. This is a chord melody right here. To the A chord. To the C. And then resolving. It's that nice nice G sus4 resolution right out of the end. Now this is basically, I mean, I have to say, this is probably the most restrained I have ever seen John Petrucci on a guitar solo. Alright? I'm going to say it right now. It's the most sort of slow and melodic solo that I've heard out of the guy. And he's using a slide of all things. Maybe it's because he's not used to using a slide too often. Maybe it forced him to slow down and kind of look at the instrument slightly differently. That would be kind of cool if that was the case. It's just a theory, but hey, once again, pretty cool to think about. We also have some other elements to cover that are within the keyboard part. The first thing is this really loud headphone bleed coming from Derek Sherinian's cans. He must have had that shit blasting. Just shows that Derek is a true rock and roller. The next bit to cover is the return of the double mellotron, once again being split between the two speakers. This helps add continuity to the arrangement because the previous verse section also had the same mellotron effect going on. And as we know now, these chords cover the verse progression, but in a different context. This mellotron then morphs into an organ part seamlessly as the chords drift away from that verse progression. Oh yeah, and let's not forget another fake guitar that we have to go through. I'll play it against the real guitar. Yep, Derek Sherinian has done it again, having the gall to use the fake guitar patch on a keyboard and amp it up to make it seem like an actual guitar. It's straight up diabolical and insane. To add insult to injury, these are also on the actual guitar stems as well. Now that we're out of the guitar solo, we can get into the rest of the song, into the outro, which is basically the pre-chorus and the chorus, but we've changed keys once again. We start on an E minor chord, which is held out to a C, G over B, A minor, to F, C, D minor, over C, G, to a G. Alright, G over B to a G. And then, key change. B flat sus2 instead of a regular chord to an F, D flat sus2 once again, very 90s sounding. Then for the ending, F over A, and then check this out. We hit an E flat over a B flat and then resolve it to the B flat. Check this out. And then we go back to that F over A. This is actually a very hard part to play if you're not used to playing these chord voicings, alright? Now, John Petrucci, of course, is a seasoned musician, and he understands how to play these inversions, but look at that, watch. Alright, kind of crazy. It's another way of playing a B sus4, but it's adding the sixth in there as well. Just like that. Let me just play from the that inverted F. Watch this. Check it out. Okay, then we hit into G minor. G minor over F, which you basically just have to bar with the pinky up top, mute the A string, and then play an F on the bottom with the open D as well. So, then an E flat, E flat minor, just like we saw earlier in the song, but in a different key. Now everything is up a minor third, alright? So significantly higher key than we had before, right? So the pre-chorus part earlier on was in the key of A. Now, well, it's in the key of C, because it's a minor third up. The chorus part was in the key of G before, now it's in the key of B flat, because it's a minor third above. Alright, so we got some crazy stuff going on. Not that crazy. It doesn't sound crazy in the song. It just sounds like they're singing the same thing, but all of the instruments have to capitulate and play in this different modulated key. Now on top of all those chords, we also have some slide licks that are added on top with a distorted guitar from John Petrucci once again. Now there's not really much to say about these because it's pretty much exactly the same as before with some very, very slight differences, which I'm going to have them rip right now and you can take a look for yourself. If you really need to know exactly what's going on, just rewind the video and take a look again. It really doesn't require much of an explanation. Now I might have lied just a little bit before to say that there was nothing extra to add to that, because there is. There's a harmony guitar that comes in on that big bend right in the pre-chorus, right at the end there, and it happens on the high E string. Let's check that out. Other than that distorted and acoustic guitar, we also have one more Leslie lick that comes into play here right at the ending. And here it is really slowly. Check it out. Ready? Basically anticipating the G minor. And essentially miming what the distortion guitar was doing in the earlier iterations, well, and in this one as well. It's basically doing this. Watch. We have... We're coming off of that whole, basically the F inverted, all right, with the A on the bottom, and we're going... A beautiful type of thing. It's basically like a G minor 9. Flatted 7th as well. Going to this, just a G minor arpeggio over F, which this is also a B flat triad, but in second inversion, but it's a G minor with an F on the bottom, okay? Remember, you can have triads on top of root notes that don't match up and create 7th chords with them. And then we have this E flat 5. That represents the E flat major. And then here, it's going into the flat 3rd of the E flat minor. Okay, so nothing crazy going on here, but just a nice little thing. And also, this goes along with the bass line that we saw earlier. Alright, so compositional move that, well, honestly is necessary. And the addition of that guitar on top of the other 2 guitars gives us 3 full guitars. Oh my goodness, John Petrucci, you're a crazy man. 3 guitars on one part? It's not that unheard of, but it does add to the thickness and really help bring this chorus and pre-chorus over the top, unlike the other ones. All right, so it sets it apart and makes it distinct. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Thank you for coming along this journey. This has been a fun one, a more simplistic one, a little more close to the heart, as we say. A little more emotional investment has been put into this song, Anna Lee by Dream Theater. The second to last track off of Falling Into Infinity. We only have one more track, folks, and it's the big one. It's a big, big, big one, which I'm going to split into 3 parts, by the way. Thank you for coming along this journey. If you'd like to further support the channel, please go to my Patreon or Subscribestar pages. Those links are in the description. There's going to be an annoying bar that comes up on the bottom of the screen as well that tells you all about it, people. You can also support by leaving a comment. You can leave a mean comment, a nice comment, whatever you want to do. You can leave a tip on my PayPal tip jar. That helps as a one-time donation. You could also go to my website, I give private lessons. If you'd like to get, lessons from yours truly, I will be more than happy to help you. All right? I'll be able to tell, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and we'll be able to learn whatever it is your heart desires. All right? So be sure to go to my site, sign up for those lessons. You can get in direct contact with me whenever you wish. All right? All right, everybody. That's going to be it. Let's have a good night, a good week, a good month, and a good year. All right? Let's make everything count. Make every day count, people. Life is a blessing. Don't waste it. Peace out.